Hey guys, Thomas Cecilia Jr. here, aka Mustached Tom, here to review the movie Glass. So, I guess this is technically a third installment of this little trilogy that is kind of come about, starting with, well, yeah, Trinity, because there was Unbreakable, then there was Split, and now there's Glass. So, yeah, Trinity. That kind of just happened. So I suppose I should go over that I did enjoy Split enough. I thought, the James there in the middle, who does the different persona character, did a good enough job. Unbreakable, uh, it's been a really long time. I've not rewatched it to remind myself of what that movie was like. So, um, yeah. And just to get it out of the way, I think it's safe to say that M. Night Shyamalan has had his ups and downs, especially his downs, things like The Last Airbender, so, uh, to see him sort of bounce a little bit back with Split at first was a little bit interesting. So I was actually kind of looking forward to the movie Glass. And yes, this will be a spoiler review. I'll be recapping things along essentially the story and sort of saying how I feel about particular things. So, as this movie gets started, we see this random bystander get attacked by these two men, one who claims the word, and I can't even make this beginning up, Superman punch, which, if anyone watches wrestling, you'll know what that is. So it cuts to his house, and this is some guy who's looking for views on the internet. But his little friend Ralph goes in searching when they hear the door open and the lights go out, and it cuts to them having such a nice time. So we cut to Bruce's character, who I'll just call the Overseer, since that is his superhero name, and I'll be referring to the other guy as Glass, since he technically does call himself Mr. Glass. And the guy James's character, he is sort of this persona character. His ultimate form is technically called the Beast, but he doesn't activate it too much. So I don't know if that should be the name I just call all of them. I mean, in my notes I did call him the persona character, so I might just refer to him as that. Anywho, it cuts to this little corporation inside, and it shows that more and more young women, have been abducted. And the Overseer is looking into this matter. And his son, who I'm not sure if they got the same actor from Unbreakable, like the kid, and now he's grown up. I'm not sure if that's the same actor, but regardless, they're both looking into this matter. And then he starts to think about his wife. So it cuts to Mr. Persona guy, and he's currently in a more youthful persona at the moment, as he's talking to these women he's kidnapped, and he's referring to letting out the Beast. So we cut back to the store to see M. Night Shyamalan make an appearance in this movie, and if I'm not mistaken, that is a reference to Unbreakable again, as I think he also made a appearance in that movie as well as a similar or perhaps the same character, question mark, I'm not sure. Nonetheless, the Overseer starts to move, and he bumps into, yeah, I'll just call him Persona, since it's like what I kept calling him. It's so easy. So yes, Persona goes over to this uh, other area to change into the beast specifically. Meanwhile, the Overseer saves the girls that were captured. And when the beast returns, he rages out, and uh, the Overseer takes him on. They both fall out a window, and they both get their flashed by the police. And some woman talks to uh, one of the personas named Dennis, I believe it was. It could have been another one. There's way too many personas in that one body, to be honest, to have kept track of all of them, all of their names, so I do apologize about if I got one of them wrong. And the two of them get taken in. So it shows her talking to this woman, by the way, her name is Ellie. She gets shown to talk to the Overseer, then to, I believe again it was Dennis specifically, and she talks about how she treats those who claim themselves to be superheroes. So we cut to some of the new members also talking about how Glass is already there, and he has probably already been there for a certain amount of time based on what happens later on. So we cut to the surviving character from the movie Split. Her name was Cassie. She is also in this movie as well. And she's kind of still thinking about what the events and kind of wants to check in on him. So anyways, it cuts back to one of the workers checking in on Mr. Persona, and it shows that he is in this room where this light flashes in his eyes, and that causes him to jump or change into another persona. So he's going through more of his personas at this time. So, this old woman who is Glass's mom, I'm not sure, I didn't catch her name unfortunately, but she talks to Ellie about his crimes and what he had done, and kind of just wants to make sure he's alright and stuff like that. And Glass is still in his room. So the guards check in on the Overseer and Persona, and the two of them see each other. So, the Overseer gets wet. Now, if you don't know, in Unbreakable, it is implied that water is his weakness, and they bring that back here as well. So Ellie comes in, and she wants to take an MRI from him, and then checks in with Mr. Persona, who's now speaking Spanish. I guess he had a Spanish persona. I don't remember him having that in the Split movie at all, to be honest. So I don't know. Again, I don't know how many personas he has. I think they said in that movie he had 8, but there is this implication that he'd made more, question mark? I don't know. Again, I'm not sure, so... She starts talking to the young persona, and then this priest persona, as he kind of changes on his own. So, the Overseer's son tries to get him out, but she calls him a vigilante and says that he has to stay there. And she brings up his mom and is essentially saying how events that are traumatic would cause this sort of grandeur to even exist in the first place. And then it shows a flashback, I believe, a scene from Unbreakable. I'm not entirely sure. It did look like that, but anyway. We cut back to Casey for something or other. And then she's like talking. She's there now, talking about Persona, and she's let in, and he's talking to her, Persona, about everything. So, she's like talking to another Persona, and Ellie's just sort of watching on from the background. She talks to Kevin, one of the other Personas, and Ellie wants her to help out, but she kind of just leaves afterwards. And then she proceeds to, that being Ellie, talk to Glass, and she says that she has 3 days to essentially evaluate them before she does like some sort of I think it went beyond MRI. It was like do something to like remove their powers permanently or something or other. So for some reason it cuts to the sun at the gym. It was kind of a pointless scene, and there's like one other scene where it just cuts to some random thing happening, and then it's like, okay, that was kind of pointless. So yeah, there are two of those at least in this movie. Anyways, it cuts back to the workers checking in on Glass, who got out of his room. So she, that being Ellie, brings them all, the three of them, into one room. She starts with Kevin, and after a bit of talking, she switches over to the Overseer, trying to gauge some sort of past event that might have made this occurrence happen in the first place, in which he thinks about being drowned or almost drowned by these bullies. And then tries to change to Glass, talking to him for just a brief moment. So she cuts back to she goes back to the Overseer with his past, and how he might have thought about his whole encounter with the Persona character in a different way. She tries to put the science behind the power, essentially. And then shifts back to the Persona doing the same thing to him as well, explaining all of the things that happened in Split by using science and saying that the things around him were really old objects. So we cut to Casey talking about she's in a comic book store, and she's talking to about the store owner about the very first comic book, which of course is Superman. And that actually brings up a really good point. Now, granted, at this point, I think it's safe to say that, yes, this movie is exposition heavy. Now, for those of you who don't know this fancy term, exposition is the practice of telling the audience information. Essentially, that's what it is. You can see a lot, and I mean the majority, I would say 95% of The Last Airbender is exposition. Now, I'm gonna say it, Glass isn't that much different in this regard. It's about 95, if lower, maybe by like 90%. It's still the majority of the movie nonetheless. And I think there's something that needs to be said here. And it took me until this movie to finally see it. Um, because there's this phrase that I've heard time and time again, and I think there is a flaw with this statement, and I'm going to say it. It's the phrase, show, don't tell. Now, I have an issue with this phrase. You see, it's sort of this implication that you're not supposed to tell your audience anything. And I think that's wrong. Um, Now, over telling your audience things like in The Last Airbender is also a big flawed concept. Uh, so, from watching this movie, I created a new reviewing phrase, and I think it's a phrase that more people should try to start using. And it goes as such: show people what they need to see, tell people what they need to hear. That's it. Because in a narrative movie, you need to tell your audience some things, believe it or not. It's crazy enough, I know it's crazy, but exposition by itself isn't inherently wrong. There is actually nothing wrong with it. It is the excess of it that is flawed, not the concept itself. There is nothing inherently wrong with the concept. It is how long you go on giving away exposition. And yes, this movie has a bit of an excess of it. Again, I would say about 90% of the movie is exposition. However, I do think that it still is important. What do I think it could have been cut back a bit? Absolutely. But do I think it should have been removed? No, I don't think so. Well, some of it, but not all of it. So yeah, I think I think he's starting to improve. I think this movie still has, again, that issue, but you know, it is what it is. So, anyways, the son was also in that comic book store, and he's looking into comic book villains. And again, kind of cutting back off of the movie, I think this is the first movie, and I could be wrong, about superheroes where comic books actually play a significant role in the storytelling. Now, I know what you're probably going to argue. Well, there was Spider-Man Into the Universe, which, after their each backstories were rushed, by the way, I'm still going to argue that. I've not seen any counter-argument to that, but nonetheless, when their backstories were over, it would show their comic book display, but it did not actually play a part in this story. Here, in this movie, it does, because every character's motivation, especially Glass, is motivated by comic books. Literally. It is literally about comic books. And interpreting comic books in a very significant way. In fact, I would make an even heavier argument saying that this entire movie is sort of a, hey, maybe you should go check out comic books. I think that is the point of this entire movie, and if that is the case, I think in that vein, it is successful. Is it a successful movie completely? No. It's still a flawed movie from start to finish, but I think its goal was met at the very end of the day. And yeah, I can't think of any other movie, again, that uses comic books in its narrative. And I think that is so bizarre that I can't think of a single superhero movie, to my knowledge, that has done this. So, good on Glass. I'm honestly stumped. I have nothing. There's no... Wow. Caught me off guard. Good job. A golf clap for Glass on that one. Anyways, now getting back to the recap portion of it, and I probably got lost in my notes. I'm pretty sure I was talking about Superman, and I found out where I was. Yes, and as I was mentioning, the sun, I was looking up at the villains, and he starts to see a comic book villain that reminds him of Persona, and he's starting to look up Persona's character. And Casey's also starting to read comic books, and she's reading more about the Unbreakable character. So they're learning about each other's characters in a way. So it cuts back to the sun, and then back to one of the workers calling out, and then going into Glass's room. So this worker almost accidentally, I'll put that in quotes, accidentally drops a light on Glass, and if you know anything about Glass, his weakness is his body is very frail. That's why he's called Glass. So there are more odd cuts, as I mentioned, to these workers being distracted. I almost didn't catch what was going on because I was like, that's a weird cut, but this one was a little bit more like, oh, okay, I kind of see what's going on now after the fact. So Glass is able to, within the time frame of them talking, is able to once again get out and look up information on Persona. And the workers keep talking about whatever they're talking about. I wasn't like particularly interested. Anyways, so Glass goes into his room, that being the room of Mr. Persona there, and talks to him about comic books, again, as I mentioned. So Persona talks about being in doubts about himself and the Beast a little bit there. So it cuts to, I believe this is like a flashback, or no, it's not, not yet, sorry. It cuts to the next day, or the next event, which is Ellie taking Glass, and it shows some odd angles. There are some weird camera moments as well. I will also argue that. As they laser grid his mind, or point at his mind with this red laser, we see a flashback of him as a kid, and we see that this ride he went on went out of control, and this is one of the probably the first instance of his body getting frailed about wickedly to the point of breaking. So afterwards, one of the workers checks in on Glass, and Glass slits his throat with actual glass. So now it goes back in time to show how he moved about, how he hacked into the computer, and essentially took the system apart. And this little flashback actually shows something very important for spoilers later on, as he does explain his plan literally. But anyways, he goes back to Persona and sees all the different Personas, and finally watches as the Beast is finally revealed. Like, once again, in the second time in the film. Nonetheless, it shows the Beast making his way, using his powers, and the two of them talk about how Glass wants the world to essentially see their powers, and they reveal these two buildings that they're going to be opening up, and he wants to essentially destroy this building, or he says that this is his plan to destroy these two buildings, and then proceed to have all of the world see this. So, as they talk about their plans, they start to head out. And thus, one of the workers arrives on the scene late, that being the murder of the other guy. So, one of the worker guys sees glass moving out, and that worker is killed by the beast. So, the overseer was sort of left in his room, and he was told the plan by Miss Glass there. So he starts to ram into the door, slowly but surely denting it as he keeps ramming into it. Meanwhile, Glass and Persona move on to the basement. And again, we see them start to get more and more people on their case. And Ellie finally arrives on the scene after... I'm not really sure why she left. I forgot. Oh, geez. There was something that happened, and I didn't even probably catch it, but anyway. So, the Overseer gets out, and he gets his raincoat, which is his superhero costume for all intents and purposes. So, Casey, the son, and the mother all converge in the same location. As well as, Glass and the Beast are also already there, and more security are moving in. Ellie checks the cameras and sees all of them converging in on each other. And thus, as we cut back to the mother, again using comic books, she talks about this being the final conflict between the superhero and the supervillain. So the Beast starts to flip the car, and Glass is doing a little bit more camera work, and then he moves back out. So, more cop cars arrive on the scene, and the Beast gets ready to go at it again, and he's tackling more security. So, the three that are watching on, that being Casey, the son, and the mother of the Glass, are watching this scene play out, essentially as this little mini audience. And the Overseer finally makes his way out as well, and Ellie is again seeing all of this go down as well. So the Overseer and the Beast go at it again, and the Overseer is slowly seems to have an equal in battle, but more police arrive to break them up. So, Glass starts talking to Casey about her being the one that survived in Split. And Overseer moves his cops into this container where they can be safer. And then Ellie talks to Casey about getting him back inside. Again, just trying to keep everything safe. So, the son moves into the battle zone and mentions the parents. And he tells about this backstory about his own father. And then proceeds to explain how he killed Kevin's dad, that being one of the Persona's dads. And that actually was a little interestingly crafted. I would have never. They actually worked in all three stories, which is pretty interesting. I won't deny that. So Glass explains that he did indeed create the persona in the first place, as well as the overseer. So the beast throws the overseer after pushing Glass, which, him being as brittle as he is, essentially does do him in. But he throws overseer into this water tank, and he does eventually break out. And the beast still wants the world to see all of this. He actually does kind of want what Glass was wanting in the first place. But Casey grabs the beast, which is able to calm him down back to his, I guess, main persona, that being Kevin. And then he gets shot. So, yeah. Uh, so, we see that he's definitely going to die. Glass was shoved, which kind of leads to his death, and then I'm just gonna say it. Yes, indeed, Overseer does die as well, but that's a little bit later. Those are the three spoiler deaths, I suppose. But nonetheless, we do see Ellie take the Overseer's hand, and we see her at this dinner table and this little black clover tattoo that she has. And she's talking to all these other people. And then when she makes her way over to Glass, who is dying, she talks about the mother, talks to Glass about this, and then Glass explains that this wasn't, I forgot what he said at first. He said, this isn't this is a, shoot, what was the line? I actually did enjoy that line. This isn't something, this is something else. Anyway, he essentially said that this was the start of something, but I forget what the actual word was that he used. Anyway, sorry, I do apologize. The word is blanking on me right now. So yes, as I mentioned, the Overseer is officially taken out by drowning him. And the Persona guy is still suffering through all of his changes as he's having his final moments with Cassie. All of his personas technically are, and then he dies. The son checks on his fallen dad, and then he's like upset and yelling at the cops. And then we reveal that Ellie was actually also really into comic books as Glass dies, telling him that she was a part of this secret organization that essentially keeps this balance and stuff of that nature. So she tells the group that those in the vicinity that there were drugs involved, and that all of this would be to be kept secret. None of this was supposed to get out. And then she talks to her group about keeping order. So she proceeds to go to this comic book store where we see Batman in the background of all things, classic Batman. And she starts to overhear this conversation about one of these comic book characters named Mastermind. And they discuss how Mastermind would have this secondary thing that was going on in the background where uh, it really was this instead of this. So she thinks back to everything she had done, and she remembered that she had placed all these cameras up to record all of Glass's movements specifically. So she rushes back to her little facility uh, and checks in on the recordings, and it would appear that Glass managed to find a way to stream what was happening to this live site. So she makes her way out and screams out into the hallway. So it cuts back to the mother of Glass hearing this last message that Glass had, and thus she meets up with the son and Casey as they sit in this train station, looking on to see that the footage that was recorded is now being sent to various people's phones. And I just remembered that he said it was an origin story. This was an origin story, that being Glass. Wow. Wow, how did I not think of that? So, that was the movie Glass, as the three of them watched on as uh, the display that Mr. Unbreakable, the Overseer, and Mr. Persona in the middle there had their altercation at the end there. And now it's all for the world to see. And that was the movie Glass. Is this movie heavy on exposition still? Yes. Yes, it is. As I said, I would say it's about 90%. With the breaks happening in at the start of the film with the two of them fighting, and then carrying on at the end where the two of them fight again. And again, most of the majority of the movie, the chunk of the movie, is talking about stuff. But I'm not gonna lie and say that all the stuff that was being talked about was boring, because some of it was actually pretty interesting. And again, I think that is the secret to exposition: is you tell people these really interesting things, and you kind of leave out these minor details because no one really cares. And sort of finding a balance between exposition and the sort of action in these superhero movies, again, I think is something that M. Night Shyamalan still needs to clearly work on based off of this film specifically. But again, based off of both Split and this, I do think that there is improvements being made, to say the very least. So yeah, getting back to the discussion about the interesting part, again, it is so very interesting to see a world where the idea of comic books is so interwoven into these actual superheroes. I think that is a concept, again, that I have just not seen before in any other superhero movie to my knowledge. So I do give the movie props for that. That was pretty damn clever. And as far as performances go, James still kills it as the multiple personas, of course. I said that very much well in Split as well. If you did not see that review, I'll put it in the link in the description. And again, I just haven't seen Unbreakable recently, and of course I have not reviewed that, but nonetheless, I think that this is an okay follow up to sort of put it all together. And I'm actually surprised about something. Now, yeah, all three of them die, which I'm actually thinking about it actually now. I'm not actually as surprised by. I suppose, everyone mocks M. Night Shyamalan for the "what's a twist?" And, I suppose the twist was that Ellie was sort of part of this secret organization. I guess. It wasn't that big of a thing. So, the actual, twist wasn't anything significant, at least to me. However, I was a little bit caught off guard at the end there. It shows all of the three remaining characters sitting at this terminal, seeing the people see the video, and then it ends. And now I didn't stay for some sort of after credit sequence or mid credit sequence, so I don't know if one exists. But if there is one, which I don't know, if there is, but I am kind of surprised that it's not cutting to a new character, showing off a power, for a quick glimpse of a second. That is exactly where I thought this movie was going to end, was even barring it being a mid-credits or after-credits sequence, we would just actually end to a cut to a new character, perhaps a younger character that's not any of them, a new character, showing off some sort of power in some way or fashion. And that's how I thought this movie was going to end, but no, it doesn't. It just sort of leaves extremely open-ended. So, will there be a follow-up? I don't know. I actually kind of hope so. Because again, I do think that this movie, as exposition heavy as it is, still carries on this concept that is, again, really fascinating, using comic books as an actual story tie-in. And I think we need more of those, honestly, so I would look forward to seeing who the next new character, the new superhero slash supervillain are moving forward. It'd be interesting to see. So as for this movie, I think the best score I can possibly give this movie is a 6 out of 10. I think that it was enjoyable enough, but again, it does have the long exposition. And again, I'm not saying remove all of it, just remove some of it. Just shave some of it off, and then cut away those two random scenes of people just doing a thing and then it cutting away. I think if the movie just did those two things, this movie would be fantastic. It'd be a solid film. And that's my review of Glass. And if you enjoyed this review, then please feel free to like, comment, and subscribe. Also make sure to check out that link in the description and head over to my Patreon page. Any donations are greatly appreciated. Until next time, everyone. Bye-bye.